Okay, let's do a second example where we use StatCrunch to create a confidence interval for us. On this one, we're going to, for time's sake, skip checking all of the conditions. We already checked the conditions on this one because we already kind of talked about this problem. So it says, recall that Morse believed that the proportion of E's in the English language was 0.12 or 12%. And we had a sample that showed 118 E's out of 876 random letters in some modern day book. We want to find a 95% confidence interval for the proportion. And we want to know, is the proportion of E's in this book consistent with what Morse thought, the 12%? Okay, so again, this is going to be, we got to tell StatCrunch observations versus successes. So this is how many observations we had. 876 random letters were observed. And out of that, 118 of them were considered successes because they were the E's. They were what we were looking for. That's what we need in order to tell StatCrunch to do this for us. Whoops. So I'm going to go close that last one. Go back under our stat proportion stats. This is another one sample with a summary. Successes in this one was 118 out of the observed 876 letters. Put it back on confidence interval. We want 95% again, so we're good there. Compute it. Note your lower and your upper limits from this screen. And then switch back with me. So in percentage form, that lower limit was like 11.2%. And percentage form, that upper limit was like 15.7%. In MLP, they might not want you to change that percentage form. Watch how they format things. If they don't include the percents or if they don't say percents, then you might be writing this down as like 0.112 to 0.157. Either one of those is perfectly fine. Okay, so let's interpret this to answer their question. Did our confidence interval come back with something consistent with what Morse believed? Well, he believed that the true percentage of E's in the language was 12%. Notice 12% is inside of the interval. So what we could say is something like, since 12% is inside of our 95% confidence interval, and we are 95% confident that the true proportion is in there somewhere, then it certainly could be 12%, like he said. Okay, so it's definitely plausible, right? That's kind of the word that they use. 12 is certainly on our plausible list. Things outside of that interval would not be plausible to us. So what we found here is we haven't found anything to disprove him. 12% could definitely be what it is. It could be some other percentage that's also in there. Maybe it's 13%, maybe it's 14%. But we can't argue necessarily with his 12%. We haven't found anything to discredit that. Okay, let's see. We have a poll on a proposition showed that we were 95% confident that the population proportion of voters supporting this proposition is somewhere between 40% and 48%. So what we've got from this is we have a 95% confidence interval that looks like this. I do not know why my stuff is deleting itself. This is driving me crazy, kids. Okay, so that's what our confidence interval looks like, with a comma in the middle that I can't get to stay. Okay, we want to find then what is the sample proportion. So this kind of is working backwards. Usually what we do is we find that sample, that p hat value, and then we add or subtract the appropriate amount to it on either end to come up with our confidence interval, right? When we did it by the brute force method, that's what we had to do. That's what StatCrunch does for us on the back end. It adds and subtracts the same amount to that sample proportion. So what that means is that sample proportion ends up being right in the center of your confidence interval. So for us, what's right in the center of 40 and 48, where if I started there and went plus minus the same amount, I would end up with these two values. So in this case, our sample proportion must be, maybe I can write it up here, 44%. Then the margin of error is that plus minus amount. It's just not going to let me write anywhere. Okay, plus minus. This goes down here. So how much from 44% do we go up and down by? 4% in this case. So you might want to say plus or minus 4% in either direction for that one.